Okay, we have Louis and Josh now.
All right, we are recording. We are live. Let's start.
Yeah, can I make a quick announcement before we start?
Sure.
Yeah, so I've just announced in steering. I'm actually going to change jobs next week. So next Thursday, I will start with solo.io. I'm hopefully to be able to lead their contribution to Istio. So it's super excited for me.
Yeah, congrats, Lynn.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I will continue to hold my TOC role since it's individual based. That's all.
Yeah, congrats.
So you're getting kicked off steering, but not off of TSC, is what you're saying.
Yeah. So in steering, maybe I'll try to get Niraj type of community seats in the future. You know, it always go with you. Those seats are better than the contribution seats.
The anxiety of standing in elections, though, Lynn. All right, we should get started.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, so let's see. Weekly reminders. We started recording release manager nominations. We have Sam nominated. Do we have anyone else? Thank you, Sam, by the way, if you're on.
Lynn, now that you're representing solos, do you have anyone from solo?
Not yet. I think she has not moved jobs just yet.
Not yet. I won't start until next Thursday. So
I wanted to give her a hard time. Go ahead.
I know. Oh, by the way, one thing I want to mention is I'm going to put my personal email in this. If you guys tag me in a design doc, I would not receive a notification after next Monday. So I'm going to put my personal Gmail here. Please use my new email. I learned not use the employer's email. Make it easy when you're transitioning. So yeah.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Am I first on the list, or are we going to do the weekly routine first?
Yeah, we were doing the weekly routine.
Okay.
Oh, we still need release management because
Exactly.
last release is done, so I really need folks now.
I think last week, Kevin and Mandar, you had said that maybe you will try to find people. Did you have any success?
I haven't chased it up this week. Apologies for that. I'll have to do that try and get something for next week sorted. I've been a bit distracted by some personal things.
No worries. I don't see Mandar on the call. All right.
Well, let's keep looking. Do we need 2 or 3? I forget how many we have for release.
3 we need.
We need 3. Okay, so we need 2 more. Okay. We have a doc for offline review. Brian, what's the status if you're on this doc?
Sorry, Sven, can we just go back quickly to the old one? Why do we need 3? I mean, I thought we have automated a lot of things and the work
Pull
is
request
being...
reviews.
All right. Okay, I'll shut up now.
The other thing here is I think we're actually throwing more responsibilities on the release manager this release that with the changes in docs and stuff that we didn't have in the past.
So what do we want to do about this doc on release manager expectations?
So if TOC can review it and let me know what their thoughts are, then I can continue working on that. I think it might be there. I'm not sure. I did some changes after we talked last time, but let's circle back.
So you want an offline review, and then next week, maybe let's try to approve it?
Yep.
Okay. And then we have this Gateway Topology. What's the status of this one? Did this get resolved?
I think it did. Hey, Jacob, you on the call? This did get approved in the networking working group. That was the last status. Unless people in the TOC and in this meeting have any objections, I think it's pretty much approved. It has gone all through it has gone through all the stages, and there is an enhancement issue which we can look at.
Let me see if I click the button. Does it work now? Yay, it works. Exciting. So performance is not marked, although is Jacob on this call? No, he's not. Okay.
Yeah, I'll ask him to fill that up.
Okay. And then we can probably approve offline, like we have with the other ones, unless anyone has any concerns. Okay. Josh?
Yeah, I'd like to point out that I put an item at the top of the queue, basically to say that I've noticed recently that people are kind of inserting at the top when, sorry, I'm still waking up. Other people already had items, and it's fair, it's more equitable to put your items at the bottom of the queue. And in order to send this message, I put this little blurb at the top. Sorry.
And then people put things up.
Yes.
But it's mostly notes on what we were just talking about. It's the weekly reviews. I was mostly just teasing.
Right.
I think that's fair. Yes, make sure when you add an agenda item, put it at the bottom. I think something that we also should do is I would recommend people put a time bound on their items, like how long they think it should take, and we should try to stay within that time bound. That's generally useful when we can do it.
Yeah, I think it's okay. Like if you have an item that's 30 seconds or a minute or under, like Lynn's announcement, you can put it at the top.
Sure.
Yeah, we should people state that this is short, and let's not talk about it for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Because we tend to do that. Okay, Shweta.
Yeah, so there was a request or ask from the TOC to have a yearly roadmap, and then there is a general format of reviewing the quarterly roadmap of a release. And then after the release, there's a retrospective. So we were discussing that in the working group leads. And seems like, I mean, it's a lot of process work, obviously, for everyone to work on. We have been doing that. At least the yearly came up, starting last week of November, and we're still working on it. Now it is at a point where, we are working on retrospective and quarterly and yearly roadmap, and there's a general concern, there's a lot of work. So I just wanted to hear from the TOC, what's the best way forward? Do we need all of them? Is there value, was the question asked by the working group leads in doing yearly and like quarterly does have a value, but do we want to do yearly and the retrospective? How do we want to go about it?
If we do quarterly, can somebody just copy and paste into a yearly doc?
Well, I think the point of doing yearly was so you could review it in advance, right? Not paste it after the fact. But right, I mean,
I see, so it's up front.
I think the options are, right? Either the TOC produces its kind of yearly themes, and then we assess quarterly the roadmaps against those themes to see if they're aligned. I think there are still some items that working groups drive that take longer than one release, right? Clearly. And so they should have an opinion about the timing and delivery of that. So it's a little hard to just do quarterly, right? Even at the detail level. Is that a fair statement, working group leads? Like if you want to progress an API to stable, then it's alpha today, then that's more than one release.
But it's fine to show up in multiple quarterly releases then, right?
Yeah, it's just the question, like, it's the work group that's deciding to do this, right? They want to plan, how they're going to do it, who's going to work on it, et cetera, et cetera. And you probably want to know that you can get it done, right? If you're going to commit to it.
I see what you're saying. Even though I have mostly seen people committing to the next stage and not the end state, right? So most of the time it's like, okay, go ahead. Rick.
So is this more of it's just too much work to do this all at once kind of a thing, or is it that this is not useful kind of feedback? Which is the actual problem here? That's a specific question for the work group leads.
So the challenge that I saw with it is just a year is a hard time to come up with a plan for ahead of time. I don't mind doing it, but things change very rapidly in the project, and trying to plan out a year means that information might not be accurate, and it's hard to go out and plan that far in advance and know that, yeah,
okay,
the information might not be accurate.
So maybe the guideline is, look, we're not looking for a complete staffing and execution plan down to 100% fidelity. It's just, what are the things you think you'd like to do over the course of the year?
Yep.
And it's okay if that changes. Right? Okay.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we can, similar to what Louis was saying, simply make the plan less good. And if it was not so much a roadmap, but more just ideas for the next year, something really loose like that. Yeah. But even goals is stronger. I mean,
that works for me. The approach that we tried to take in test and release is creating basically a whole bunch of stories and figuring out what we do in the first quarter, and then drawing out stories the next quarter, and et cetera. So if we had more of a high level overview, I think that'd be fine.
I do think there is value in creating like a theme-based doc or what the TOC plans to achieve for the project, which maybe it was a month late this time. Hopefully we'll do better next time. I think, and then based on that, just rough ideas, like we were saying, I'll be good with it.
Yeah, the other thing here that I brought up in the work group leads meeting was that we didn't actually have the TOC's high-level overview until after we'd come up with roadmaps.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yes, we
fully recognize that.
We will take responsibility.
Yeah, that's on us. All the Christmas break we slipped. Sorry.
But actually, wait, that's a good point though. Like if we do this at Christmas break every year, we're always going to slip. So.
So I think TOC.
Sorry, you broke up, Sylvain.
Sven.
Go ahead, Louis. You were going to say something.
We can't hear you, Sylvain.
Sorry. Can you? Hold on.
I can hear you now.
Yeah, no, we can't hear that. You just said hold on.
Okay, you can't hear me. Okay. I don't know why that was. I was just saying that we should do it in early, in early December. We should try to.
Yeah, sounds good.
Have TOC produce the themes.
I would suggest actually mid-November, Swain, because TOC also needs some time.
Sure.
If the plan is available but before December, it will give some time for the working group leads to produce the roadmap for next year. It will be too late if we do that in December.
Sure.
Right, because the alternative is we make the Q1 release, whatever it is, very bug fix oriented, and we do it in Q1, right? But yeah, I'm fine with either. Shweta, the proposed dumbing down of the working group roadmap, right, to goals or themes, do you have any objections to that? Does that help or hurt you in any way and kind of your organizational role?
No, it does not. So my general concern was to have a consensus. Do we want a yearly as well as a quarterly roadmap? Because I think that's where the more contentions are, that quarterly is more detailed. And when we review the yearly, it does capture the quarterly roadmap, like let's say for the current one, but it does not go into the details. So are we then saying that we still want the yearly as well as the quarterly roadmap? Because the proposal I have here on the dates is to review one yearly roadmap, which we discussed 2 weeks back in the TOC, and then for 1.10, 2 of the quarterly per working group lead. Do we all
So it
agree
sounds
to
like,
that?
like we're still asking the working group leads to produce a yearly roadmap, but the level of detail, or it's directional and thematic. It's not a detailed breakdown of work items planned
Correct.
out by quarter with expected headcount and things like that.
Correct.
It's higher level.
Yep.
We still want to review it, I think. It didn't take very long to go over it.
Are all the working group leads okay doing that?
That works for me.
I think that probably works. I'll just say that from my perspective in UX, there's a lot of time that is poured into roadmaps. We spend about 2 weeks a quarter, either on retrospective or on the next quarter's roadmap, as well as the annual roadmap. Then in the TOC meeting, we spend probably 3 weeks a quarter reviewing roadmaps, reviewing retrospectives. Then we have the weekly working group leads meeting where we're looking at our roadmap and checking how we're doing on it. I don't think that that is bad, but it simply means that the payoff for all of that investment needs to be very visible. Certainly in 2020 on the annual roadmap, we know that we didn't have the kind of payoff that we needed to justify the investment there. It would help if this was providing more value to the work group leads themselves.
I wonder, Mitch, if another approach, and they're not mutually exclusive, is to do something similar to the roadmap planning, which is basically make it more casual, more informal.
I would be in favor of that. I also would be in favor of making it, moving it to a meeting that is not all hands on board. I often don't need to know about the telemetry roadmap for a given release. And so just reducing it to the actively interested parties could also reduce the amount of investment that's going in there.
You're talking about for the reviews of the roadmaps or something else?
Yeah, I suppose that would be the reviews in particular.
I mean, the reviewing the roadmaps, right, it is a useful kind of cross-functional thing for the working groups to check in and to know what the other hand is doing. I wonder if there's a way to shorten or compress the retrospectives. So we have a release retrospective rather than a work group by work group retrospective, and try and constrain that as a way to maybe reduce the load. What do people think about that?
I would be in favor of that.
So in working group leads meeting, Louis, we discussed that not a mandatory to do the retrospective. If a working group leads think that they need it and it's helpful, they can actually fill up the slides and TOC can review it offline. But if they feel like we don't need to do that, or maybe there is no time, that it's not mandatory and they can skip it altogether.
Okay.
I have a couple of quick comments. I think on the roadmap presentations, I agree with Louis. These are actually important, especially for other working group leads to understand like what other groups are doing. I think we want that, and especially Mitch, UX really should understand what every other working group is doing. I know it's a lot of time, but I think it's important. The other thing is, ideally, the yearly roadmap would help the working group leads in defining the quarterly roadmaps, right? The release roadmaps. So ideally, this would be a document that you can refer to when creating the 1.11 roadmap, right? And see, okay, our backlog from our yearly is these things. All right, we'll just pull those in and hopefully save time. So if it's not doing that, we should probably figure out how to help there.
Yeah, I think, Sven, I was going to say the 2 points that you just said. So I'm not going to repeat that. But basically, looking at the quarterly roadmaps and TOC meetings is one of my favorite parts here. Not just because I get to understand what's going to happen, all the crosstalk, and trying to understand collectively how it is moving. But it looks like, Mitch, you were saying it's less useful, and the usefulness is being measured by how much we have actually achieved in the roadmap that we set out early in the quarter or early in the year. So there can be a lot of things that might have gone wrong because of which we didn't achieve it, right? If that's the only measure of usefulness that you're talking about, we can work on lots of different things to improve the efficiency there. Is there some other usefulness that you're trying to get out of these activities, but you're not getting? Like, is there some value which is inherently missing?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure that I have a clear answer to it. I'm simply observing that there's a great deal of investment on the working group lead side, and it doesn't always feel like there's value for that investment, if that makes sense. Unfortunately, I know that's pointing out a problem and not a solution.
So would it help if you knew that TOC really finds it extremely useful and helpful?
Yeah.
And that,
yeah,
like,
I suppose that does.
We need to be better about acknowledging how much work goes into this and help us.
So another thing can be better course correction and sort of actually maybe at least twice in a quarter understanding where we are with our proposed promises for the quarter. Like, it looks like that part is also missing. We actually don't measure until the end. We say, okay, we didn't finish these things, so then move on.
Yeah, so I think I agree. I think we should look at re-reviewing where we are against the yearly roadmap on a kind of when we review the next quarter. So maybe not for 110 because we'll be in February, but for 111, that makes sense to relook. I don't know.
A mid-year check-in.
Yeah.
Or middle, yeah, mid-year and end-of-year check-in.
Something like that. Like, that might be more satisfactory for everyone in saying, okay, is this actually working, or basically this is just a waste of time and we should do something else.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's good. So, guys, I feel like there's huge value on the overall roadmap because that's also made out to our user. The workgroup roadmap, you know, it should be minimum time spent because it's really used internally by our contributors and the community, right? So I hate to say, you know, we would not require you guys to spend a lot of time. It should be minimum time and adjust as needed.
and maybe we can just make it even more clear that we don't expect perfection in our yearly roadmaps.
Exactly.
Just guidance.
Yeah, so Shweta, you know, one of the things that's in the yearly roadmap that is tracked in detail is API progression.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that one we have made a statement that we do want to track that in detail, but we could possibly just break that out from the other aspects of the roadmap, which are more feature function oriented, and say, look, those things, they're tracked at a very kind of coarse-grained, you know, aspirational description of what we want to do for the annual, and then we just have a more detailed tracking for API progress or feature progression. Right? I mean, we still kind of have to do that, right? We have to hold ourselves to what the documented standards are for those things.
Understood.
But that can be done on an ongoing basis, right? That doesn't have to be tied to like this planning event, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, unfortunately, the yearly came up with the same time as 110. So I share, you know, it's a lot of work. Yeah, but I understood what you said, Louis.
Okay.
So I have the
that's one thing that we can do.
Yeah. So given our dates around IstioCon, I assume we're most likely going to have IstioCon probably early next year also. It does seem to make sense to have like the most recent roadmap produced before the conference. So I kind of like what Louis mentioned, like early in the year. So maybe the first quarter would be more dedicated, not much feature from workgroup, but you know, having the roadmap produced by the TOC and then the workgroup.
So let's do this. Let's not spend more time, right? In summary, we did agree that we need a yearly and a detailed quarterly roadmap. So let me come up with the dates for the next year. So we are marching towards it while we are, last Q4 of 2021. And having said that, I would suggest let's go with the networking yearly roadmap in this, because we are 30 minutes in the meeting now.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, thank you.
So we're doing, which one are we doing today? So we're doing networking yearly and then test and release and networking 110. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That is a lot, but it is important.
Yeah. Is there anything urgent before we go there, before the roadmap as a P0 in the agenda? I just want to make sure that's not leaving behind.
Is there anything short?
Yeah, sure.
Well, and I'll add that if TNR doesn't need to do the 1.10 roadmap, we had planned on doing both of them next week.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe we should both networking right now and then both test and release next time. Yearly and 110. I think the problem is we want to get 110 roadmap reviews done before we're already done with 110, right?
Yeah, well, 110 started after Tuesday this week. All right, let's not waste time. Let's go into networking then. We'll do TNR next week for both.
Okay,
Thank you.
See how we can make it, yeah. Okay.
Right. So who's presenting this? Sorry, Sven.
I was asking who's presenting the networking roadmap.
John, would that be you?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, you muted. Go ahead.
Yeah. Can you make it so it shows more of the right side of the screen, which has some details?
I can by doing this, I think.
It's not a big deal. If not, I can just describe it. Okay. Yeah, I think this is most of the stuff we've already talked about in previous roadmaps as kind of longer term plans. I actually don't think there's anything here that's going to be surprising, potentially. So first up, we have better transport security. We've been working on this for quite a while now, and that's going to continue to be a focus in 2021. Hopefully we'll go beyond experiments and designs by the end of 2021 here, and we have something that we can start using at least experimentally or at an alpha level.
Is it P0 though? Sorry, I want to understand that more. Since we have said it's a P0 for 4 quarters and we have not delivered, should we just be real with it?
What does P0 means again?
That we are actually going to make tangible progress and deliver something in that quarter or the year, in this case.
Then I think it's P0. No, we still want to make progress, and it's super important, I think, for networking to make progress on that. We'll not complete it, probably, but...
Yeah, Josh, Yuchen was out for a while, right?
Yeah.
So
Josh left.
Did you leave? I just recently noticed that Yuchen started submitting a bunch of PRs back to Envoy related to this, so it's picked up again.
Okay.
And progress has been made on the Envoy side. I mean, we are not the only one working on this. It's all kind of work on Envoy side that is...
Yeah, I think we haven't really done anything on the Istio side because it relies on the Envoy stuff, but the Envoy side's been progressing quite a bit, so...
Got it. That's good.
Well, I think it will very suddenly happen on the Istio side, and it will quickly happen because the control plane changes are, pretty simple.
Yeah, and it's still pretty fundamental, right? It does provide a lot of value.
Okay, we good on this one? Then the next one we talked a lot about having better global defaults for things like timeouts, connection policies, that sort of thing, so that users don't have to go configure it in hundreds of different destination rules. So we've done some work on that already, but we're going to continue exploring that a bit more in 2021, hopefully. This next one has been on a roadmap for quite a while, so it's kind of already in the yellow or red, that we want to promote CNI out of alpha, stabilize it, improve it a bit, make it more usable. We don't have an owner for that right now, so it's kind of tricky, but I think it's pretty important because it's a big blocker for a lot of users, and it's not great to tell someone either use an alpha feature or go use another solution because they can't use Istio without CNI. So it's important, but we do need an owner. Next one, removing custom extensions. This is really low priority, but it would be nice to have. We've talked about moving all the extensions out into WASM so that we could use upstream Envoy. So yeah, this is more of a nice to have. We don't have any owners dedicated to this right now either. It should probably be at the bottom. Multi-tenancy, we are starting to explore it a bit. I don't think we have any concrete designs, which is why it's kind of vague right now. So the action here is not really to go implement multi-tenancy, but more to figure out what exactly we want to do for multi-tenancy. And then maybe we'll implement it as well in 2021, depending on what happens. But for now, it is intentionally vague.
And we have some items that we are working on. I mean, we have some designs and proposals to improve isolation and in progress, actually. But we don't have, the big scheme ready.
Yep. Yeah, next is some form of Delta or on-demand XDS. This is, again, kind of vague because we haven't started designing it yet, but we know that we at least want some sort of adoption, whether that's for performance gains, which are likely to be substantial, or potential future features of Envoy that will be tied to Delta XDS. So it's still pretty early, but I think we want to have at least something here in 2021. It's mostly lower priority because for now it is mostly just performance optimization, and we haven't had too many users screaming about issues. But I could see it being the kind of thing that suddenly becomes a P0 once we start hitting a wall somewhere. So it'd be good to get work on this started soon. Next is the continuations of the service APIs, which they just renamed to the Gateway APIs. So this is adopting the new Kubernetes API. Put this at P0 because it's hopefully going to be our new GA API for networking. Their current plans are to potentially be GA by the end of the year. So we definitely need to keep up adoption with them and make sure that we drive the direction of the project in a way that aligns with Istio and allows us to adopt them for gateway and sidecar traffic. So we're working closely with them and continue on that. This next one's basically linked to it, but the stability of the networking APIs. This is effectively us saying that we do not plan to promote the networking API as a virtual service destination role gateway, because we are instead going to move with the service APIs and effectively treat those as the stable Istio networking APIs once they are ready, is the plan. So we don't want to promote our APIs and then tell users to migrate. So then they have to migrate twice, which is painful. Go ahead, Niraj.
Yeah, so you just said that these APIs will be called gateway APIs. Is that signifying that they don't anticipate it to be configured for east-west traffic, or is east-west going to be a separate set of new APIs that's going to be defined?
Yeah, so the term gateway is kind of vague. Like we've used it always to mean north-south traffic, but it technically doesn't need to be. I think we will use gateway to mean both types of traffic. So we will use the gateway API to represent sidecars most likely.
Okay, I think that UX needs to be figured out a lot more, just because of there's a perception and there's a usage pattern right now among Istio users. And if we say now consider everything as gateway, it's going to cause a lot of confusion.
Yes, we're still working on how exactly we're going to model it and how we'll push it to users, but I agree, and we will keep that in mind.
So John, a quick question here. So would the sidecar API still remain what we have, or there's an equivalent from Kubernetes Service API?
Yeah, so all of the APIs for quite a while will probably remain. I mean, there's probably thousands and thousands of virtual services out there in the wild, and we have no intention of just stripping those out and making users migrate forcibly. So we'll probably have to keep those APIs around for a very long time. I don't want to say forever, but probably quite a while to allow people to migrate. So in that sense, they will definitely be there. Now, whether the optimal or like recommended is to use Sidecar or a one of these new APIs is still kind of up in the air. The nice thing about all of our APIs is they layer well. So you could definitely use like their HTTP route and gateway and replace our gateway and virtual service, but then still layer on the destination rule and the Sidecar APIs that we have today. So whether those will be fully replaced is still up in the air. I think certainly destination rule will be. Sidecar is very Istio specific, so that one may actually stay around, but it's not yet decided.
Also, one thing to keep in mind is that the Kubernetes APIs are intended to be multi-vendor, so there will be multiple implementations of multiple vendors, but it's also a baseline. So they'll have the core features that all vendors support, and that's the main power of them. But users want advanced features that are only specific to Istio, they will probably continue to use Istio APIs for those specific features and be locked to Istio for if they use those features.
So John, I think once we have a little bit more clarity on kind of how these all fit together, we probably should do a review in TOC of the, what it's all going to look like. Not that we have control over the Kubernetes APIs, but we at least can sort of say where we think things look okay versus where we're worried, and help drive that conversation too.
The time will be. Sorry, go ahead.
On that front, like Sven, I'm spending an awful lot of time on this because obviously it's pretty central to what we do, and one part of that will have to be coming back and showing, like, in context examples of how you would do the equivalent thing you do today in Istio with whatever combination of these APIs would make sense. Right. The gateway use cases seem fairly obvious and straightforward. The Sidecar ones are still not totally figured out.
My point is, I think we should bring that to TOC sooner rather than later, just to have that discussion.
Yeah, no, as soon as there's something coherent to bring, it will be brought. Yeah. Right now, there's nothing that quite meets the bar in every dimension.
Yeah.
But it is getting close. So I do suggest that people who specifically spend a lot of time on the networking APIs start familiarizing themselves with the current state of the gateway APIs. Just remembering that the term used there, gateway, is a collective noun to refer to a set of API changes and not just the gateway resource itself.
Yeah, I was going to say they are implemented also, so people can start using them with Istio and review and get feedback before they move to the next stage in Kubernetes.
Yeah, no, I think this is good discussion on how we can be vigilant of these changes coming, but I do think we should move on.
Yep.
Yeah, so the next one is the multi-cluster service discovery. So this is another new API out of Kubernetes that refers to how multi-clusters work. And we want to be one of the first implementers. I don't know all the details here. So if you have questions, Sven probably knows more. Okay, yeah, the next one, Ipv6 hardening. We have some testing. It's alpha right now. I am certain there's bugs that we don't catch in our tests, but we don't really have an owner right now, so we're kind of stuck in alpha state. If we find someone that will own this, which it sounds like potentially Niraj or someone who works with him is possibly going to step up here, hopefully. We'll see. Then we would love to get this to beta and have better testing, fix up any bugs we have. So dual stack coming to Kubernetes.
We will definitely be working on IPv6 and dual stack. Depending on the pace of our development and how quickly we can bring it to upstream, we'll contribute how all of it if we can. But you can put our name down or put my name down for now. I'll figure out who will actually do the work.
Awesome. The next one, maybe even should be P3, is alternative capture mechanism. So right now we do IP tables, of course. There's some limitations and performance issues and just general dislike of IP tables that we've looked into having alternative methods to get traffic to the sidecar. This would be just, I mean, potentially just design at this point. We'll see. We don't have an owner for this either, so it's kind of in a vague territory right now, but it's something that we're looking into. Next one's also fairly low priority. Is supporting HTTP 3 at the gateway. So we're not trying to tackle general UDP support either at the gateway or sidecars due to some complications. But HTTP 3 is actually relatively easy compared to generic UDP support. So we were looking into adding that at the gateway only. So that people can terminate HTTP 3 and then forward as HTTP 2 or HTTP 1. And that's pretty much it.
So I do see a lot of stuff with owner needed here, John. How confident are you that we will be able to find owners for these things?
So I think the most important one is CNI. That's ownerless, but actually also important. I honestly, I don't know. It sounds like there might be some people from Google interested in pushing this forward, but I haven't heard anything conclusive. The other things like alternative capture mechanisms, I don't know if anyone will pick this up, but I also don't think it's horrible if we don't do it in 2021. I don't know if that answered the question really, but.
Yeah, it does. The other ones are P2 or P3, basically, except for multi-tenancy, but
yeah,
I would question whether that's actually P1 anyway. Okay.
For alternative capture mechanisms, I'm assuming eBPF or some other BPF technology will be in consideration. Is there an opportunity to work with some other communities who do that work? I don't know if anyone is friends with Cilium folks.
It's an interesting idea.
Yeah,
Yeah,
certainly. I mean, GKE announced their support for Cilium, right? So yes,
exactly why.
Yes, we are friends with the Cilium folks, if that's what you mean.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll certainly talk to the GKE networking team about this subject. But yeah, we still have to do an independent evaluation of the pros and cons of, and well, mostly about what kind of dependencies it would be acceptable to take, right, to do this.
Yeah.
If we wanted something else, or because it comes with a non-trivial amount of complexity.
And a long time to complete. I think the UDP capture is probably the most important problem to resolve because that's a missing feature.
Yes.
Okay, let's should we move on to quarterly
or releasely? Yes.
Or sorry, releasely, I should say. And I don't see a link in the other doc for networking's 110 plan. Do you want to present that, John? Do you have that somewhere?
Let me see. I think our 1.10 plan is just the top part of that doc. But yeah, we have like the things that are planning to graduate in 110 if you scroll over to the side, I think. Yeah, so it's mostly just start work on some of these that we're able to find owners for, and we're hoping that we can, the things that we're actually trying to do actively in 1.10 is the global defaulting, CNI. We need to find an owner, and we're definitely going to have a lot of active work in better transport security. But then we don't have any solid plans beyond just continuing with these other longer term efforts. So we're not trying to introduce anything too new in 1.10, just continue existing efforts and stability.
Okay. The other one we had was test and release.
So they said they wanted to do the 2 next week, right?
Yeah, Eric mentioned they can do it next week, Sven. So there is few other things in the agenda for TOC to do. Maybe we can pick that up.
Let's do that. Okay. Sounds good. John, back to you.
Oh yeah, so last week we talked about wanting to review breaking changes in the TOC. So I figured if we're going to do that, I noticed a couple of breaking changes. So I wanted to bring them up here to, I guess, at the very least trial around what that will look like. If that sounds good.
So this first one's crossed out. Does that mean we reverted it or? Hold it back?
Yeah, I think it's at least deferred. I thought it was planned to be turned on by default. It sounds like it is likely not, and then it will not be a breaking change. So we probably need more discussion outside the TOC. If it is planned to be turned on by default, then we can bring it back here. The next one is about removing the server header by default, or I think it just entirely. I'm not sure if we even plan to make it configurable, which is probably fine for the vast majority of users. The concern is that some obscure users depend on random headers being there, and maybe they're doing some logic based on that. I really don't know why someone would do it, but people will do anything that we give them. So,
John, so just a small clarification. It's not removing server Istio header, but actually preserving the server header added by the application itself. So making the configuration be passed through rather than by default always override and make it server Istio.
So my understanding is that it will not set the server header if it's not present either.
Absolutely, yes.
So we never set, oh yeah, so it's not removing the server header, it's just not adding it or replacing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If the application writes one, it will pass through.
So I think if we make this configurable, it's not a breaking change, right? Because it requires configuration.
It is, yeah, it won't be a breaking change. And that's what we were discussing, but we couldn't come up with a real use case of why to even expose a configuration and expand our surface area here.
What does the gateway do?
Same thing right now.
Same thing.
Well, no. Yeah, so that's the question, right? Exposing internal server implementation details to the public internet is a problem. Right, so if the server says I'm Apache Tomcat 5.3.6 and there's a known vulnerability inside it, right, you don't want to do that. That's why all edge proxies scrub server headers.
It's a problem the other way around too, right, Sven? Right, Louis?
I'm certainly, I'd rather say Envoy 1.7.9 than the 70 different implementations of struts internally, right? At least it's one thing to deal with and not 90.
Well, so I think the question is do we want to make it configurable so the user can opt in to preserving the server header from their application?
I think in East-West, the right thing to do is to preserve the server header. Like, I think that should have been the default. And the default at the edge should be to scrub it, both for ingress and probably egress, I think. And then we could decide if there's any value in having a flag, which there may not be any value. Austin, I see, is nodding his head.
Yep.
And anybody else have a strong opinion about this? But right,
do we know what the current behavior is exactly?
It puts Istio server Istio dash envoy for everything, whether it's north, south, or east, west.
Okay.
And the argument for east west was if someone relies on the address on the header, they'll be broken by what we are doing, because if you add Istio, then suddenly you get a different header than you were getting before. So
I mean, we can concat, right? I mean,
why?
I don't know. Yeah, a good question there would be why.
If you find a use case, yes, we can. But
East-West, it's useful for debugging, right? Whether it went through Istio or not, like I could see value in that.
That's what the what's that other? There's some other header we can append to track it, or maybe that's an internal.
X404.
Yeah. No. Like you can concat in the header. A server is like user agent. It's composable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I agree, Louis. For gateway, right? The server is the gateway, so we should we should write that. And then east-west, yeah, we should probably pass through. But yes, we need to make this configurable.
Well,
I think there's a debate about whether we actually need to make it configurable or not.
Exactly.
Well,
I don't.
So gateway will be always add header, and sidecar will be always don't.
And then we can decide if we get user feedback about whether we need more configuration. But I want to add configuration if we.
I would at least flag protect that behavior, right, in the initial release that changes it.
We can have a plug, yeah. It's reasonable.
So mesh config thing, is that what we're suggesting?
Environment variable mesh config is ready for alpha feature. If you want to just to have a kind of flag to turn it off if we run into problems.
Yeah, I think that's probably the right thing is to have possibly a development only flag to turn it off if you run into problems with that flag. Feature status that flag doesn't progress past dev.
Yeah.
Unless we get a lot of user feedback.
Yeah, I'm totally okay with that. By the way, also again, just like everything else, there is an envoy filter break glass thing here, which is if someone really wants it.
If we hurry up, we can get to that discussion.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, there's agreement. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not captured in the notes, but
I will capture that.
Yeah. I think what we would like to see is east-west server header is maintained. Gateway yeah. East-west is passed through. Gateway it's not, and it's overwritten.
Yeah. We'd be fine with east-west being concat.
Or east-west concat is fine too.
No.
I guess we have other ways to know it's Istio, so yeah, pass-through is probably better.
Yeah.
People don't do a good job at user agent handling anyway, so yeah.
Are people really depending on the server header for things?
Yeah, sadly, yes. That's why I've been pitched.
Okay.
I don't want to give you the concrete example here, but it's a nightmare.
I'd love to hear it. You can tell me offline, Niraj.
Yeah, I would love to hear an example because we don't have user using it, but maybe we're not.
You can protect the name of the company who's doing it.
Yeah.
Sven and I know some good. Sven and I have some good examples to share maybe in the future on similar lines, but we would have to protect the name of the companies doing the things. Anyway, that's.
I used to work on a bunch of XML APIs that we had to maintain order of attributes because people were depending on them. Because they were just doing, give me the second attribute value. And anyway. Yeah, good times. Back in Pet is fun.
Okay.
Okay,
so forward original best, John?
Yeah, let me give a quick background. It may help if you open the doc, if that's easy. So if you just ignore Istio, if when you bind your application, you bind it to some IP address. Generally, people are binding it to either localhost, wildcard, or the IP of their pod. So without Istio, if you bind to localhost, then other pods cannot reach you. So if that table probably kind of describes this. But when you add Istio, we configure the inbound clusters to forward to localhost. And so this actually changes behavior. So if you bind to localhost, now your service is actually exposed to the world. And the other concern is that if you bind to the pod IP, now it's not exposed to the world. So this ends up with a lot of people having issues with applications that bind to the pod IP. Some common ones are Zookeeper and Elasticsearch. And so what will happen is they install Istio, suddenly all the traffic stops working. They have no idea why. Access logs don't really help. Envoy logs don't really help. You just get connection refused. And it's pretty tricky to debug. We have a goal of making Istio just drop in place. And so ideally we preserve the behavior. So I think everyone, at least that I've talked to, is in agreement that preserving the same behavior as Kubernetes is clearly better. But the one concern is that this will change the behavior of existing users of Istio. So the concern would be that someone adopts Istio and then they are developing their application. They randomly pick, say, localhost bind, either maybe intentionally or maybe just accidentally, and it happens to work because they only tested with Istio. And then they just keep using that because it worked. And now they upgrade to whatever version we do this, and suddenly it stops working. So unfortunately, it's tricky to do some auto migration or detection because we don't know what the application is going to bind to, and they may actually do it at any point in the pod's lifecycle, right? They could bind an hour into the pod, so it's not like we can even do startup detection. So it's tricky to provide migration here. What we do have is a script that will run through the entire cluster, look at all the binds actively running in all pods that have Istio, and detect ones that are on localhost so that they can run this before upgrading, figure out which ones they need to change, and then modify their applications before upgrading. What we also will allow is using the sidecar ingress configuration. Users can explicitly choose how they bind to their application. So we had a few users run this. There's like 5 users that I convinced that have pretty large clusters. And there was a few that were using localhost. And there was basically 2 cases. One was they were actually intentionally doing localhost, but they're already using sidecar and already explicitly configuring it to connect to localhost. So that would work fine. And then there were some cases where users just randomly were listening on localhost for no foreseeable reason, which they are now migrated. So I think this will have some impact, but it hopefully will not, like no one will be angry that this changed other than the fact that they have to modify their config, hopefully. But there is some impact to upgrade, so that's why we brought it here.
Do we consider this a CVE?
We did not consider a CVE. Part of the reason is that it's only, so the behavior that I mentioned with Istio with the service is it's only if that port is exposed in the service. So if you have your random,
okay,
like the admin port of Envoy, for example, that's not exposed. So you would have to listen on localhost and expose it in the service, which is kind of an obscure thing. It is security related.
Sure. I mean, I guess you could listen on the pod IP with one thing and on the local host with another thing on the same port, and then chaos might ensue.
Yeah.
So there's still a risk there. Like there is a security justification for making this change, even if it's fairly remote.
Yes, I agree. Go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah. Is this already implemented in 1.9?
No, the plan was to implement it off by default in 1.10 and make a lot of noise telling people to run the script and migrate because users can do all the changes ahead of time. They don't actually need the change applied to change their services or generate the sidecar config. That's all supported today. And then in 1.11, we would turn it on by default, and then potentially in 1.12, we would remove the flag.
How hard would this be
now, but it's easy.
How hard would this be to backport into a patch release, John?
It could be done. It's not a huge change. It's mostly testing. Do we want to backport it?
I think I don't know, but it's certainly a conversation worth having, right? If we're going to release the tool now, telling people to run it, and they can obviously run it against some set of existing Istio releases. And it is a weak security issue. I don't know. Knowing that we could is useful. Whether we have to or not, I think depends on what reaction we get from asking people to run the tool.
Yeah, that makes sense. The actual code change is pretty trivial. It's just changing the cluster config we generate. I think most of the work is just around testing and getting the word out to users about potential upgrade impacts.
But having it as an option that user can opt in, I mean, can select, I think it's super safe and useful.
Yeah, that was the plan for 1.10, was that's how it would be. We could backport it to 1.9 and speed the process up a bit if we desire. Yeah.
I think
yeah, I mean, well, I think the thing is, we don't necessarily have to speed the process up in time, but we give users a bigger window for adoption if we backport.
Yeah.
Well,
Because at some point we're going to say we're going to change the default behavior.
Right. But users can adopt the correct behavior now, even without the patch. Like they can go change their localhost binds to wildcard binds. I mean, they can't change them to pod IP binds, I suppose, but I think most people will go to wildcard. That seems the vast majority of applications are doing.
Yeah, if we ever get a feedback from someone who says they want to lock this down, then that would be a trigger to backport.
Since it's a very small and safe change and it will be off by default, if TOC approves to add this feature to 1.9, it will be wonderful, I think. 1.9 or 1 or 2.
I don't see any harm in it, to be honest, if it's off by default.
Yeah, as long as we're comfortable that we can, test it and vet it, I have no objection to making it allowed to be backported in the patch release. Whether we need to or not, that's a different question, but right, I think that will depend on what we see happen when we engage with users to use the tool and what kind of feedback we get. How are users directed to provide feedback about running the tool? Is the tool linked in the 1.9 release notes?
No,
it
was the plan originally before this 1.9 discussion was to have a blog post and whenever we finish this, which would presumably be in the next few weeks, and then have it also in the 1.10 release notes.
Given that there is a potential security vulnerability, I'm a little wary about blog post being the first thing that we do, as opposed to asking the vendors to go and directly engage with their customers and then maybe put it in the patch release notes. That might be a better vehicle. I'm not sure this is the kind of thing we would do blog post on anyway. So.
Yeah, I mean, it could be all of the above as well. Just get it
right,
as many places as people look, Slack, discuss, blog, whatever.
Other TOC folks, what do we think we want to do here?
I still feel if we can, we should backport with default off. So if we do want a blog post, it has to be crafted in a way where, yeah, it's going to be a little tricky. I would rather release note it and try to surface it through other mediums. But if blog post is the one that gets the most attention, I can help craft it.
So I think it's clear we need to fix this. The thing I'm still a little bit worried about is the whole reason we're talking about this is the backwards compatibility breakage, right? So how confident are we that we can help users through this or like not accidentally break them when we switch to the default?
Yeah,
we will, right?
I think it's tricky because we can't do like an automatic Istio analyze or something like when they run Istio install and just tell them you have a localhost IP, because the script goes, it execs into every single pod in the mesh and runs like netstat and looks at stuff. So it's not something that we can just automatically do. It's very slow on a large mesh and kind of invasive as well. So it's tricky to automatically detect it.
So John, is there a way that we could get a better detection mechanism into, well, some release? It doesn't have to be 1.9, right? So we don't have to do something quite as draconian as that.
The problem is we don't know the intent of the user. I mean, you may use 127.0.0.1 exactly because you don't want it to be exposed.
Oh no, like I understand. So what we need to know is, like, are we forwarding traffic to 127.0.0, right? For a port for original destination. If that's occurring, it's a red flag.
Yeah.
But the fact that we have to, exec into every pod to figure this out, right, is not tenable to be put into Istio analyze. If there's some other way of knowing that, then that might be, and it would become part of the upgrade, the pre-upgrade verification, and be worked into the normal process.
Does the original desk traffic give any metrics other than saying it was original desk? As far as I know, it doesn't.
No, and it doesn't tell you if it's 127.0.0 or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't know. It will just say connection refused.
Yeah.
Can we add it?
Yeah.
Not easy.
Could we add a metric for this to Envoy?
How would you?
No,
We
it's not.
might. Can you see the remote address from Envoy? And then record it, like before we make this change, record the metric if it's local, if they're bound to localhost. I'm not sure if Envoy sees that or not.
Will the audit logging capture this? Could you actually use an auth Z policy to check this? In theory, you should.
Maybe. We can look into that.
Okay, because
Like
I still think it's worth.
we should make this an option, and we should, educate users as quickly as possible. Like they should turn this on, but without being too obvious about it. But yeah, if there are people that we would break, ideally we would find out. We would let them know before they upgrade.
Okay. Well, given that we have a tool, right? We can.
Now we have to work.
Right. We can take the feedback that we get from users of the tool and use that to make an assessment. I don't think we want to go too crazy, so I'm not going to ask that we go and do this work in Envoy or auth Z filter just yet. And that yes, there's some risk to be borne here.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I know we're focusing on upgrade, but I guess one bright side of this is we're actually doing something makes sense for the user and also a lot easy for the user so that they don't have to modify their configuration, like to keep listening to local hosts. So it's actually a lot easy for user to onboard into service mesh.
Yeah, there is a lot of benefits, not just for some traffic patterns like Zookeeper, but also security-wise, right? But
Yeah.
I don't think without sufficient alerting, we can just flip the switch here. That's the
Yeah, it is
problem.
dangerous.
Time check. We had 12 minutes.
Yeah, we're over. All right.
John, did you get the feedback you wanted? I know, I don't think it's an explicit approval for turning it on unless we see more.
Yeah, it looks like we need to investigate better detection than the script. I don't think we can have perfect detection like Istio could analyze, but we can do like metrics as well. Have multiple. We'll probably have the script and metrics, maybe an optional audit log investigation. Like I think there's no silver bullet, but we can just do a lot of different things, and hopefully some of them stick.
Yeah, I mean the fact that we have a script already is a major step up, right, for users.
That's not runnable though, Louis, in a real cluster. I'm sorry.
It's hard. I agree, it's hard. Yeah, we're gonna have to take a look at detection.
Yeah. Okay. Let's push the rest of the agenda to next week.
Thanks for a very meaty agenda, everybody.
That's all. Everyone have a good
Thank
week.
you. Bye.
Have a good one. Bye.
A great long week.